Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 10th, and we have a special guest today. I'm going to be bringing Virginia Kreiger on, and she is the founder of Lost Voices of Fentanyl. And welcome, Virginia.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you so much. Virginia is an angel mom also. She lost her daughter to fentanyl poisoning. And she's got an incredible story of what she's been doing to bring awareness to the country about fentanyl poisoning. So, Virginia, tell our viewers a little bit of how this all started with you, your story, your beautiful daughter, losing your beautiful daughter.
Well, and I owe a large part of all this to you, Marianne. My daughter was she was pretty much an average girl. There was nothing really that gave me any warning something like this could happen to her. She was bright, beautiful, 26-year-old mother of two. Had a really bright future in front of her. And she injured her back. And someone she knew offered her a pill that turned out to be a counterfeit pill that contained fentanyl, and it killed her. And so I first... I started researching to see how this could have even happened. What was illicit fentanyl? How did it get put into a pill that looked like a Percocet? And how did that pill make it to Ohio in the hands of my daughter? And then I met another mom who went through, a similar situation. And then I met another one and another one. And that's when I realized that this is so much bigger than, a health crisis. It's much more than that. And so, I started looking into what was going on in Mexico, what was happening with the cartels, where the supply lines were coming from. And the more I learned, the more disturbing it became. Finding out that China had actually entered into, what is probably the largest criminal network in global history by supplying the cartels directly with these deadly products, how little the public knew about, the fentanyl and what it was actually doing. It's just mind-blowing to me. We buried we're getting near the neighborhood of 500,000 people. And China never had a fire shot. And the narrative that all these people had to have had something wrong with them, who are dying. And that's just not true anymore. It's not true. I have I have 3 children. 2 of my 3 children have been impacted by fentanyl. My daughter, who on this end of the spectrum, who didn't have any issues. And then my youngest son, who after she died, fell into substance use disorder. He started using meth so he could feel happy again. And he too was poisoned 3 times by fentanyl in methamphetamines. And so, and my son's in a coma right now, and he's probably not coming back to us. So I will have lost 2 of my 3 children. 2/3 of my family has been wiped out. And we have parents who've lost 2, 3, 4, 5 children. And yet this is going under the radar, unaddressed and unacknowledged. And so, I started working with other parents. We formed Lost Voices of Fentanyl, which is now the largest organization of its kind in the country, with more than 31.7 thousand bereaved family members. We go and we talk to schools. We educate the public. We talk to congressmen and senators, and we're working with federal agencies like the DEA and the CDC to try to, first of all, humanize this crisis, but also to help people understand what it really is.
Right. And the magnitude of people who are families that are being ripped apart, but you've got people who go all across this country on platforms and talk about it. And you've got elected officials who talk about it during election years and will come and pander to you and talk at your organizational events that you put together. But in reality, and as angel families, we've been saying this all along. What are they actually doing? We're all just collateral damage. And there's really nothing that we see as being a step forward. Whereas us in these organizations like Lost Voices of Fentanyl or angel families, we make a step forward, but there's 15 steps backwards. And we're continually clawing, trying to bring the truth to the American people about what's happening to our country.
Oh, and I think that's probably the worst part of all is, I sat in rooms on Capitol Hill with congressmen telling them my daughter's story, And then they look right at me and try to tell me that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there had to have been some history of substance use disorder because, well, that's not true anymore. The truth of the matter is that on the last National Drug Survey, 138 million Americans admitted to either using an off-market pill or trying a drug at least once within the past year. That's nearly half the US population. And the lie that they're telling is there has to be something wrong with you for you to try or use a drug. That's not true anymore. The truth of the matter is that drug use has become as mainstream and as much a rite of passage among our youth population today as alcohol. It just has. And so rather than put money towards getting public awareness, going into these schools, informing these children, alerting the public so that they understand that this danger exists, they just continue to sweep it under the rug, pour billions of dollars into programs that aren't helping. And then they stand back and say, well, look, we set up a bunch of new user centers. How is that going to help the 5-year-olds that we're burying right now? It's not. How is that going to get people out of the daycare centers or the middle schools or the elementary schools? It's not.
Well, and the Mexican cartels press these chemicals into pills, which are counterfeited to resemble pharmaceutical grade medications for depression, pain, and ADHD. And don't you feel, Virginia, that coming off of COVID-19 and the lockdowns and the crap that we were put through as a nation, that there are so many people looking for that quick fix in a pill, and they'll take it from somebody that they know, or they'll order it online. How many times have we read about these young kids on TikTok and Snapchat ordering a pill to be delivered to their house, and they take it, their parents aren't home, and their parents come home and find them dead.
Yeah.
And it's all about feeling good and feeling normal again, right?
Right. And so we're talking about, the lack of education to teach our kids coping skills so that they don't need to turn to these substances. We're talking about a culture that has emerged where big pharma direct markets to market, person to person marketing every day, just telling everybody, oh, you've got a headache, take my pill. You feeling sad, take my pill. Hair's not shiny enough, take this pill. They literally market directly to the public, telling everybody that a pill or a powder can fix everything. And then we have an entertainment industry on top of that who normalizes and glamorizes drug use to our youth. They'll be cool and hip if they're doing drugs like these guys. And then what happens is they get mad at our youth for picking the messages up that we're allowing to be put out there.
Right.
And so we've created this culture, and then enter fentanyl. And just to clarify for all your viewers, there are two different types of fentanyl. There is prescription grade fentanyl, which is the type that you get from a physician. That is made right here in the United States under extremely controlled conditions. It's heavily regulated and managed because of its potential lethality. Illicit fentanyl products are not legitimate products. In fact, they're not fit for use in human beings. What they have done is they have taken the base fentanyl molecule and either added branches to it to increase its potency and duration, or they make chemical replacements during its processing that do the same things. So carfentanil, acetylfentanyl, parafluorofentanyl, there's a growing list. And all they have to do is change one ingredient, and they have a whole new version of these illicit fentanyl analogs. So when we talk about this crisis, we are not talking about what you're getting from a doctor in a prescription. We're not talking about what an anesthesiologist might give someone during surgery. We're talking about street grade products that are not fit for use in human beings. They're mass shipping those to Mexico. And the reason they do this is because it's so incredibly portable. For the amount of money they would get from an entire truckload of heroin, they can achieve that much financial gain from one brick of fentanyl powder that's pressed into a brick. But what's even more dangerous about this is it can kill in 2 milligrams or less, especially for people who have no tolerance to opiates. And a new study just came out that shows that victims are actually suffocating for a full 2 minutes before they even know that they are. And by the time they go down, if you do not have Narcan to keep them alive long enough for EMTs to get there, it is a surgical level sedation where they do not breathe. And without respiratory support, they will die.
Right.
And now we have new forms of it that are coming out that are containing what they call nitazines that are even more lethal because they're Narcan resistant.
Well,
So the one Band-Aid we did have isn't even effective anymore.
well, and I don't think a lot of people understand that fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, far more powerful than heroin.
Yes.
And that I was reading last night, this was really sickening. And I know you and I have talked about this, but the latest threats include a horse tranquilizer, which causes lingering flesh wounds in users, and nitazines, that's synthetic opioids that appear to be even more potent than fentanyl.
Yeah,
So
and
there's
those first
constantly
emerged in
being
Russia.
things brought to market or to the public in the black market that our American citizens aren't even aware of the threats that are
No.
lingering.
And so if in any other world, if someone had taken cyanide, pressed it into a pill, and they actually did, that looked like a Tylenol, and then someone took it and they died from cyanide poisoning, everybody in the country called that a poisoning. Yet when someone takes this poison, illicit fentanyl, which is unfit for use in human beings, and they press it into a pill that looks like Adderall or Percocet or Vicodin and hand it to another person, we're calling that an unintentional overdose. That is not an overdose. It was not an accident when the drug manufacturers modified the fentanyl molecule to make it more potent than it should be. There was no accident when they took and got an illegal commercial pill dye to mimic trusted trademark pharmaceutical products like Adderall, Vicodin, Percocet, oxycodone. And it was no accident when they put all those ingredients into a pill press machine, pressed them all out, then went online and were selling that stuff to kids and adults as being a Percocet or a Adderall or a Vicodin. That is a classic poisoning. Anytime someone hides or disguises a harmful substance as anything or in anything for another to consume, and it causes harm or near-death injury or death, that is a poisoning. Here we are. We're still using that word overdose as if the victims somehow did it to themselves. Tiffany did not know there was fentanyl in that pill. And if she had, she would never have taken it. But she'd had Percocet for her wisdom teeth, so she knew what that was. And she knew that one Percocet wasn't going to hurt her. Right. And here we are. So now, even an act of charity that we may have for our friends, you can't trust where they got the pill from anymore. So
no, and words matter. Words matter. And it's purposely done the way that it is to talk so that the victims of these fentanyl poisonings can just be poo-pooed as drug addicts, and they weren't contributing members of society anyway, and boo-hoo, oh well, it's their fault. I mean, I was listening to the Mayorkas impeachment inquiries just a little bit ago, and that's exactly what they were saying. Yeah. Some of the liberal politicians were saying, we've got drug addicts and they're going to demand this type of things come over. And, 85% of the fentanyl comes across through our border, like not illegally, they come in through the border gates. And I'm thinking, no, a lot of this information that the liberals have is wrong. And we really need to re-educate America to understand that you can't always believe what you hear, even if it's coming from an elected official.
I would say especially if it's coming from an elected official.
And you have to be diligent in your research, as you were, to go as far as to get a DEA profile on the fentanyl that was in your daughter's bloodstream that killed her, to know that it came from Mexico. I mean, this is what a diligent mother does who wants to get to the bottom of things.
And that's what I tell families is, the one thing about this is that's what they want to do. That's what they did in Tiffany's case. They wanted to swipe it under the rug, and nobody wanted to investigate it. Nobody wanted to look into it. We are burying babies. So how do those babies fit into the narrative that they're trying to put out there? The CDC just released it. It's right on their website. They just did the first profile on the victims. I've been crying for this for years. And guess what they found? Only 6.4% of the victims were actually in treatment for some type of addiction disorder. So who are the other 93% dying? There are kids. There are those kids who are adventurous. There are people self-medicating who don't know. But instead of reaching out to them, instead of trying to help, we've been accused of being vindictive and wanting revenge by liberal politicians who have insulted our families so much that they've walked out of hearing rooms crying. Because, if I wanted vengeance, then I would have went and I would have gotten the woman who killed my daughter and the person who harmed my son, and I would have done something to them. You know, trying to warn people to keep them safe so they don't suffer the same losses that we have. That is the furthest thing from vengeance that I can imagine. In California, SB 350 was a simple admonishment clause. All we wanted, it's modeled after the MAD bill. And what it does is it gives an admonishment after someone's already been convicted of drug trafficking, an admonishment by the judge warning them that if they continue to traffic drugs in the future, and if they kill someone, that the prosecutor could or might have the discretion to hold them accountable for drug-induced homicide. The California Public Safety Committee, which was has a majority Democrat body, all voted it down. They don't even want us to give people a warning. Stop, you're killing people. They don't even want us to say that.
It's so disgusting.
And so that's what we're up against. We have Snapchat, you know, they know. We've sat at the table with Snapchat. Our families have, not me personally, but and communicated to them how the platform is getting to kids and how these drug traffickers are now right in your living room in your child's cell phone. They are quite aware of all the deaths that are directly related to Snapchat advertising. But what they told our families was they don't want to spend the money to improve the drug trafficking detection on their platform, which to me is a real slap in the face. You can find the word MAGA or COVID, you know, anywhere that is published on the internet, but you're unable to locate key drug trafficking words to keep kids safe that are using your platform.
So
and then ironically, what Snapchat does is the message vanished without any footprint whatsoever within a matter of hours. So there, once someone's dead, the parents may have some information that they're able to harvest off their children's phones, but there's nothing there for the police to track. It's the perfect criminal model.
Right.
And
you know, when I was kind of doing a little research, trying to figure out, like, the new totals have come out for 2023 fentanyl deaths, more than 112,000. So obviously we're going up and up and up every year. But I was watching some videos of some people, and the money that, you know, local, county, state, and even federal money is going to harm reduction programs. And I cannot believe how many active users are running these harm reduction programs.
Well,
and
you know,
that's really admitting it, Virginia.
When you have enablers running the show and you don't have any objective voices, that's what happens. And I'm not saying there aren't any. There are some good elements to the harm reduction efforts that are useful. However, there's a fine line, very fine line between healing and enabling. And I'm sorry, but anybody telling me, I will never accept that putting up, you know, a so-called, and I use the term loosely, clinic, where you say to people, come on in and inject poison in your bodies and we'll watch you so you don't die. That isn't healthcare. I'm sorry. And, you know, the life expectancy for a fentanyl use, an illicit fentanyl user, someone who's actively seeking fentanyl, is 12 months or less, because it's only going to take that one time. It doesn't matter if it's their first time or their 800th time. It's only going to take that one time. They get one tiny little grain too much and they're gone. And, you know, it doesn't matter how tolerant or you are. It is a loaded gun. They're playing Russian roulette and they know it. They just don't care. You know, they really, what we decided was that the best way to approach this that can help everyone is to make sure the public is well educated about this, to address the main supply sources in China and Mexico, to, you know, push our legislators to, you know, implement drug prevention and education in our school system so our children are aware of these dangers, and the parents as well. But I sat in a meeting with the U.S. Department of Education at the last DEA Family Summit and listened to them give us 501 reasons why they couldn't have fentanyl prevention and education in the schools. Why? And not one of them was a valid reason, by the way.
They can have gender fluidity type of conversations and sex, you know, changes, those kinds of conversations with our children, but not a life-threatening issue, and warn our children. Okay. Right.
And so now we have this current administration, who, by the way, has been so weak and ineffective that China's laughing at us. You know, they are. They have waged the most efficient drug war in history, And so far, they've gotten away with it completely scot-free. And ironically enough, the president of Mexico, he's trying to make demands to us now. He removed all protections from our federal agents investing the cartels in Mexico 2 years ago. Yeah. 2 years ago. And now he's trying to make demands. He's sending investigators to abandoned drug labs and then trying to act like, oh, we look at this, we busted this drug lab that hasn't been in operation for a year and a half. So he's fully complicit in all of this. And, the American public just needs to start really paying attention to what's going on. And, if you look at what this administration has done for solutions, again, they're only looking at 6% of the victims. They are not acknowledging nor addressing the other, 93.4% of the victims, right, who are just average people who don't need rehabs. They don't need addiction treatment services. They don't need needle exchanges. They don't need those things. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Well, and all the talking, that you've done, because you and I met in Cincinnati at a We Build the Wall symposium. And, ever since then, I've watched you just take giant steps. And I think you needed a little encouragement. But I knew that there was something in you that was going to be incredible in this fight, not only from an Angel Families, platform, because you obviously are an angel mom, but from this fentanyl poisoning. And it's just sad because in King County in Washington State, they had over 1,050 fentanyl deaths in 2023. And that is over a 47% increase since 2022. And drug experts say that the magnitude of this eclipses every previous drug epidemic from the 1980s to the prescription opioid crisis in the 2000s. This is bigger than any drug epidemic that we've had in this country. And yet, where are our elected officials demanding, this should be a bipartisan issue in Congress. Everybody should be coming together and working to absolutely close the borders and do something to stop this. But they don't think, because of their agendas and because of, re-election and what are their constituents going to think? I need to get reelected into office to keep this high salary and make these ridiculous laws and stop the right things from happening in this country. That's more important than your daughter. That's more important than my son.
Yeah.
That's more important.
And that's the rub. I've been yelling from day one, for COVID every day. Every day there were tickers on our screens that said this many cases, this many people died. Within 2 weeks, there were public safety warnings everywhere. Wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. I mean, that was there. We are 10 years deep into this crisis. Nearly 500,000 people are dead. And you know what? They're not even counting how many near-death injuries there are every day. The only thing you're hearing about are how many are dead.
Right.
I'm telling you, if they were to start literally tracking the near-death injuries, it would dwarf by far every death counter that we have. There are some victims who have encountered fentanyl more than once, but the profiles of the victims is another thing that they hadn't looked at. They didn't know who they were, how fentanyl got to them, what their health histories was. But then they're trying to allocate resources to fix a problem they haven't even assessed. Yeah. How can you even do that? And, so when they look at me and say, oh, well, we've allocated $10 million to, rehab and recovery centers. And I'm not saying those are bad things. But when you're ignoring 93% of the problem and the death tolls keep going up, that should be a strong indicator after 10 years that you're missing something. But they won't. They will not accept that there's an alternate reality going on here. And when our families stand in front of them and try to share our stories, we get marginalized, mocked, laughed at, ignored. The hate that I've gotten has been, well, people are cruel. And because they don't know, they think that somehow we're against them. No, I can't save my daughter. My daughter's beyond saving. I can't save my son. What we're trying to do is save your families from going through the same thing that we have, to help you understand so you can keep your family safe. There's no benefit to this for any of us.
And I think back to when I was called to DC to testify, Senator Tillis, and of course it was an election year. and they were having me come and testify about the importance of anti-sanctuary laws because, of the damage that it does. And people don't, they hear in the news right now, these sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago and stuff. But what they don't understand is because of the sanctuary city status that they have, these illegals can commit crimes. They can sell drugs. They can do whatever they want to do. And they are released back out onto our streets before their trial to commit more crimes against American citizens.
Yes.
And there's a big refugee camp on Randall Island up in New York. And I was just reading where there's there's gangs in there, and they have weapons and they have drugs. So these people who are coming over the border undetected and bringing drugs and whatnot, they showed them even entering these, like a school that they've converted into a refugee place right now because of the weather. And the parents are complaining because they're showing them just pouring into these schools when the parents have to go through metal detectors and everything to even enter that school. And yet these people are just being let in. Their backpacks aren't being checked. How many of them, and how little are fentanyl pills? That they could have bags and bags of them in there.
Well, in the absence of studies on these new forms of fentanyl, and by the way, there aren't enough studies for us to even know what all these various analogs are capable of. So what they've done is they have relied on 50-year-old conjecture surrounding pharmaceutical grade products for safety messaging. You know what? What they published 50 years ago in the 1960s on fentanyl patches that were made by a pharmaceutical company does not apply to these illicit fentanyls that did not even exist in that time frame. And rather than doing
be
studies,
like a 50-year-old study about social media, right?
Yeah. So then, they're going out and they're telling the public, oh, it can't be absorbed through the skin. Oh, it can't be this. It can't be that. You know what? You don't know that. You don't know that because the study hasn't been done to know it. But I can tell you right now, when you alter the chemical foundation of anything and you turn it into an entirely new chemical, it could do a lot of things that you don't know it could do. Right. But the one thing I can tell you is that it takes 2 grains, smaller than salt. It has an air hang time in powdered form, similar to that of baby powder. And the minute it hits a mucous membrane in your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, it's in. And it doesn't matter if you breathe it, if you get a little residue in your hand you don't see and rub your eye, it will get in. And once it's in, it's in. And, to people who have no opiate resistance at all, those babies in the daycare center that had to be hospitalized because someone in the daycare center had fentanyl on the premises and was selling it from the daycare center. We have parents who went to an Airbnb in Florida for vacation, and their 1-year-old was crawling around the floor in the unit they rented, came across fentanyl contaminated cocaine under the table and died.
I remember.
So it's not unreasonable to be concerned about, who's been in there before you, who could they have left some residue behind that you're unaware of. Because it's so deadly, this should be taken so seriously. But people just act like, well, it can't happen to me. Yeah. Well, I've got close to 500,000 people who can tell you it did happen to us. Yeah. We have a mom who was forced by the court to let her son have visitation with the father, despite a girlfriend who was using drugs. The child went over there on a visitation, got in her purse, found one of those pills that looked like candy and ate it and died. He was 3 years old. And what did she do wrong? As a mother, she obeyed what the courts told her to do, that failed to protect her son, failed to protect her, and ultimately he died. And who's going to be accountable for that? Well, obviously the person who had the pills, but who's going to be accountable beyond that? Because there should be someone who's accountable.
Right.
When fentanyl became the #1 cause of death for ages 18 to 49 in this country, when the actual life expectancy in the United States started dropping, that was a clear sign we're missing the boat. But these guys are just doubling down on stupid, and they just don't want to listen to our families. And it's frustrating because it shows that we don't try.
Yeah. And the age group that this is hitting, is really troublesome because you've got a generation of people right now who are all, this trans movement and, the families not having families. And then you've got, this age group that is affected by the fentanyl poisonings. And what is going to happen to this country? You know, everybody just acts like everybody is a one issue. They're only able to process one issue at a time when there's many, many issues facing our country. But when something like fentanyl poisoning represents so many deaths, I mean, they're talking at this point that more people have died of fentanyl poisoning in our country in the last decade than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam War combined.
Yeah. Well, I'll do one better. Last year, we buried more to fentanyl poisoning last year than we did during the entire 20-year long Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And that's not conjecture.
Right.
And that doesn't count all the near-death injuries. You know, the other thing they never started tracking, what happens when people stop breathing? They get brain injuries. It's called hypoxia, when you don't get enough oxygen to the brain. We have so many people who are in nursing homes, in comas, who aren't even counted as being part of this crisis because they're still breathing, even though it's on a ventilator.
Oh my gosh.
So that is how poorly managed, you know, when they get someone into the emergency room who's had one of these near-death injuries, there's no follow-up neurotesting. Nobody's following to see if they suffered any type of brain damage to even know. I mean, there are no protocols. They haven't updated risk assessments. And yet then they look at us and try to tell me in all seriousness that, you know, they're working on the problem. No, you aren't even trying to work on the problem. What you're doing is you're taking what you knew from an old crisis that doesn't exist anymore, and you try to just cut and paste it to fit this one. But this isn't what we've dealt with before, and we have to address it differently.
Right. And you made a very important point a little bit ago. You know, in today's world, like you said, if you're on social media and you say the wrong thing, they will find you.
Yeah.
You know, if you haven't paid your tax bill, the IRS is going to find you. Back in the day when the mad cow disease, they could find the actual farm and the pen that the baby from a mad cow was born. You know, it's unbelievable, but they can't keep statistics like this from hospitals that are all computerized, from nursing homes that are all computerized, from emergency rooms, emergency facilities, from police departments. I mean, how is it possible that these types of statistics that are needed can't be put together? How is it that when a person dies and the vital records, a vital statistics office in your state is notified that this person has died, Social Security is notified immediately, but they can't just add an extra step and send it to the Secretary of State for voter rolls? I mean, it's just insane when you think about the computerized world we live in, and yet the statistics that you've begged and asked for or know that are true will never be published or put together.
You know, the CDC just this year, started doing a tracking system for injuries, although I'm sure the data won't be very good. At least it's a start. But, you know, it took us all this time of screaming and begging and begging and begging them to please get us the right data so that we can address the problem, right. You know, assess the problem. So when you look at the Southwest border as a whole, I mean, we're looking at, you know, there are several facets involved, obviously, but what's most importantly is the criminal players who are hurting everyone, which are the criminals. You know, we're talking about the cartels, the human atrocities that they are responsible for, both in Mexico and abroad. You know, it's a failed narco state. We all know it. And instead of addressing our neighbors and going down there and making it so they can be safe where they live, instead, their best plan was, let's try to import a bunch of new voters. And, you know, who cares how much danger we put them in on the way? Let's go ahead and let them put their hands in the most brutal cartels in the world, you know, and let them be drugged through deserts and locked in cars and raped and forced to fight to the death and murdered as, you know, symbols of threats and fear to the people who are around them not to mess with the cartel. Let's let them be extorted and sex trafficked and held ransomed and slaved. You know, we have the traveling slave camps now of migrants who are under the control of the cartels all over. They're traveling around the United States. We literally have slavery back in the United States. We have all the victims of illegal alien criminals who are allowed to repeatedly commit crimes and stay here. Then we have the drugs. You put all that together.
the human suffering is into the billions that have been caused by these bad actors. And what are we doing about it? What are we really doing?
And, you know, 9/11 was horrific, terrible. But when you stop to think that more Americans have been killed by illegal criminals and by fentanyl poisoning, and this is all due to the southern border, and we don't have a Congress who will finally address this. I mean, we've got laws in place that should keep it secure. We've got money that was already allocated back in the Reagan years to putting up border security walls, but we've got a congressional body that tends to steal money. They steal money from Social Security. They took the money that was set aside in the Reagan era for the walls. They do things that are completely against what they know their constituents would want. And they view us as idiots and collateral damage. Yeah. And they will never do the job that they were sent to DC to do. There's a handful of people who have the integrity and the backbone to do something about it. But, you know, I'm always going to point the fingers back to DC because that is where the powers lie to make a difference in this. And you look at Mayorkas and what he's done to this border and how he continually turns his back on things and says, you know, to Kat Cammack from Florida, when she's telling him he's going to be impeached, you're not going to like who comes next. And she says, is that a threat? And he just smiles. You know, my show yesterday was all about his career. And he's an evil man. And he understood the inner workings as he worked his way through USCIS, Deputy Secretary of DHS, now the Secretary of DHS. He knew what he could do and get away with is the sickening part of it all.
Well, and I think that that's true of a lot of them up there. You know, I got such an education. You know, there was the way that I was taught this country runs, and then there's the education I got once I got to DC. Yeah. And let me tell you, it's nothing like what they've taught us in school. You know, we are all horse traded back and forth every day like human chattel. And to have people who can look at all this human suffering around them, who can see it, know it's there, and still refuse to do the right thing it's disappointing. You know, for our president of the United States, you know, we did 2 letter writing campaigns to Joe Biden, our families. We also did one to Donald Trump. And you know, we sent letters with our children's stories to both presidents in the true hopes that they would be able to help us, you know, do something about this crisis. We did get letters back from Donald Trump. They were, you know, they mentioned our children's names. They offered condolences, and they were on the topic of the illicit fentanyl crisis. So we did not 1, but 2 letter writing campaigns to Joe Biden's administration. And the responses we received were form letters that weren't even on the right topic. And in fact, in the second one that they sent to our families, no condolences, no sympathy, no empathy, not even addressing the drug crisis, but they did assure us that they would make sure that our children got back in school soon from, you know, the COVID epidemic. So, and I have both of those, and the responses from and then, you know, Rebecca Kiesling is one of our moms, and she gave testimony about the deaths of both of her sons. And just hear our president laugh about it and point the finger at the previous administration, it really tells you who they are.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter what year her boys died. Her family got wiped out in one shot. Both of her boys are gone. And what are you going to do about that? Laugh and shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, that happened under the other guy. Well, what about the 117,000 that died that year under you?
Right. And instead of being of the mindset that I hear you and I know this is a problem, and regardless of what's happened in the past, I'm going to take the steps to correct this in my administration. That's the way that any politician should be. And they should actually follow up on what they're doing, what they're saying. It shouldn't just be lip service to us, because this is why the American people have lost faith in most of our elected officials, is because it's all just lip service. It's just like that anti-sanctuary city bill that Tillman had me come testify for. It was just for his reelection cause, because he just let that bill go and die. And that's the point that I realized, Virginia, that it is useless for us as angel families, or you as Lost Voices of Fentanyl, to go and testify before these people, because they're using us as their, slideshow presentation.
Yeah.
And they really don't want to fix the problem. It's just a way to fill the space and the airtime with victims. And, they all say, oh, we're so sorry that happened to you. So sorry to hear about it. And then, they look at their aides and say, where are you going to order lunch from? I mean, that's how important we are to them, honestly.
We sat in a hearing room not long ago on Capitol Hill, and one of our moms had brought letters. Patricia Drews from North Carolina. She'd brought obituaries from the families in North Carolina to give to the Biden administration, which it was well over a year ago, but they just now came out with it. But what really blew my mind is we sat there at this table, and every family there told their stories of how our loved ones were poisoned, how they were deceived and poisoned by either a fake pill or a fentanyl contaminated party drug, which they all consumed without their knowledge or intent. And we had one of the Democrat representatives look us right in the face and tell us, well, you just don't understand. You just don't understand what this crisis is really about. Really, because we've lived it. So explain to me how you know better than those who have lived it.
Yeah. The crisis is about death.
That's the mindset we get. When they say the word overdose, that's an insult. What they are implying is, first of all, that there's a safe dose of illicit fentanyl to be consumed, that our loved ones got that safe dose and then voluntarily exceeded it.
Yeah. Whether
it was accidentally or on purpose, whatever. That's overdose implies that there's a safe amount to be consumed. So no, that's why we are so insistent that these are poisonings. There is no safe amount of illicit fentanyl.
And you're saying there is of illicit. That's a point that I was just going to make. There is no safe amount of illicit fentanyl that you could take and assure yourself that you were going to be okay.
Right.
Right.
And then, then they come up with these fentanyl test strips. And here's what they don't tell the public. The test strips are actually urine dipsticks that were meant for testing people to see if they were using drugs. All that they did was slap a different label on them and start using them for drug testing beforehand. So here's the rub. In order for them to test and be sure that the product is safe, they have to dilute all of whatever product it is they intend to consume in water and test the water. So this is very good if you have someone who is, for instance, an IV heroin users. And for the record, we had less than 5,000 heroin-related deaths last year in this country. Heroin is almost non-existent. It isn't even present on the market anymore. And then everybody else. So there are faulty directions on these fentanyl test strips packs, and even harm reduction organizations I've caught personally who are telling people, oh, just break off a piece of the pill, test a portion of the drugs. We are looking for a needle in a haystack. You are looking for two tiny grains smaller than salt that could be anywhere in the product you intend to consume.
The half that you didn't test.
And so it could be anywhere in the pill. It could be anywhere in the cocaine. And the micropresence is so minute that it's critical that you test all of the drug. And let's say, how practical is that? How many people who want to do a line of cocaine on Friday night are going to dilute all their cocaine in water? They aren't. Yeah. But they have presented this as a Band-Aid solution for everyone when they know that it's not. And then to give them faulty directions for use, putting the public at risk, that is the fault of these companies who are manufacturing them. They aren't regulated. There's no oversight. We've reached out to the Consumer Product Safety Commission on this issue, and so far, nothing. And why would you do that? Why would you knowingly endanger people? If they don't use them correctly, that becomes the fault of the person using it. But if you're giving them faulty directions, now it's your fault.
So let me ask you something. In these shoot up places that they have, these legal places to go and shoot up, how many fentanyl poisonings have happened in those type of situations? Do you guys have statistics?
They don't publish data on that kind of stuff.
Because of the responsibility they would hold, right?
Well, not just that. I mean, I've heard stories, and I can't verify these stories, where they've had incidents happen where the people were just shuffled right out the door. because they don't want to be associated with that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but what I do know is that, their excuse for these centers is, well, we give them literature. I'm sorry. We've all agreed that substance use disorder is a mental disorder. It is a chemically proven change in the order of operations of the brain, where people are compelled, like many other compelling diseases, they are compelled beyond reason to use drugs until they die. We have people who eat wood until they die. We have people who eat metal. So this is a real, demonstrable, organic disorder in the operation of the brain. So they'll tell you this, but on the same token, tell you that the people who have it are fully mentally capable to make their own healthcare decisions. You cannot have it both ways.
No.
So what we are advocating for is, rather than just letting them walk away, giving them a ticket so the city makes money when you catch people with possession, is that we need to start implementing mandatory rehab, at least a detox period, so that we can get them sober enough, long enough to see what's happening to their lives and hopefully get them help. But if you just bring them in the door and hand them a piece of paper and think that you're helping them, and then you're just enabling them to continue to use these drugs until they die, you're not helping.
Right.
What you're doing is harming, and that there's a big difference.
Well, and getting to the bottom of any problem is where, once you peel away all the layers of the onion and get to the core of the problem, is where you're going to have success in solving that problem.
Well, yeah.
Or understanding a person, their addiction, level. Where are they? And is there, like you said, is there any other underlying health issue that is causing this?
Like in my son's case, he had moya disease, which is an exceedingly rare brain condition that was masked by his substance use disorder. So for years, he was seen by this person in recovery and that person in recovery, and they all see him for 10 minutes, slap a label on him, give him prescriptions that never worked. And we didn't even know he had this disease until he dropped and had several strokes last April in Florida. And what causes a 30-year-old to drop on the street out of nowhere and have multiple strokes? So the doctors investigated further. They found that he had this for at least 5 to 8 years. During that 5 to 8 years, he was under the care of multiple behavioral and mental health professionals, none of whom ever did a basic physical workup to see if there's anything else going on in his brain. That's a shortfall that is unacceptable.
Well, and that's the medical industry,
Yes.
Bringing as many people in that they can see in a day's time and getting them out the door because it's a bigger paycheck for them, not really caring about the health and the well-being of their patients.
And then to add insult to injury, he survives 2 brain surgeries. He's recovering well. He's got a speech deficit, a swallowing disorder. He needs therapy because he can't really effectively use his left or right hands, but he was making progress. And he gets placed in, he needed intensive inpatient therapy. He gets placed in a facility who didn't watch him follow his care plan. He chokes on a piece of meat and he goes into cardiac arrest, and now he's in a coma. And who's going to be accountable for that?
I'm so sorry, Virginia. I know.
So
I've been through so much.
It's really sad that our own agencies are who are killing our kids.
I know.
And
the medical help, and even the World Health Organization or the CDC, you just can't even trust anything that anybody's telling you anymore. It's a sad reality in this country when, like you said, from my learnings and how I grew up and how I felt like this was the greatest country on the earth, and we were truthful people, we were honest, and we cared about our citizens, and we weren't involved in international strife and things that were going on. And to have your bubble burst and to find out really what the people are about who run this country is a pretty scary thing. And my eyes were really open when I read that book, The Killing of Uncle Sam. It was an eye opener. Yeah. And I encourage people who are listening to this to get it. It's like a $20 book, The Killing of Uncle Sam. And your eyes will be open and you will understand the bureaucracy and the craziness that Virginia and I have been up against trying to bring illegal criminal crime to our elected officials and fentanyl poisoning to our elected officials. And my son will never be brought back, as nor will Virginia's daughter. And this isn't a self-serving mission that we're on.
Mm-mm.
We're trying to help our fellow Americans to understand we've got a bigger issue than people even understand or realize. And sometimes I feel like it's bigger than you or I understand, because we really don't know who all these evil players are behind all of this, Virginia.
You know, it's just, I was like you. I really believe that these guys all looked out for us and they cared about our families. And now, you know, I call it grief porn because I've watched them for years now. You know, they'll have a campaign coming up. They'll parade some of our families around the stage, say, yeah, look at this legislation I just introduced. And as soon as the election campaign's over, it dies. It never goes anywhere. And I've watched this repeatedly happen over and over again with so much legislature that now in our organization, our families do not deal with politicians during campaign years. If they're campaigning for an election, we're not going to let them abuse our families like this, because you know what? Giving people hope and using them and then walking away from them, which is what they do over and over again, especially people who are already without support. There's no bereavement support. There's no, you know, there's nothing for the families left behind. There's nothing for the children left behind. No acknowledgement. We can't even get them to agree on a day to, you know, acknowledge our losses as a nation, to offer comfort and support to the bereaved families left behind. And the fact that we don't even do that, that should tell you who these people really are.
Yes.
You know, there are a handful, like you said, just a handful who've remained diligent, who continue to bring it forward, who continue to fight with us. But to be honest with you, we don't have very many in our corner, and that's sad. They should be.
I know. And, you know, all we can keep doing as not only, you know, mothers of children that we've lost, but as concerned citizens, is to continue speaking out like this. I will never go and testify at Congress again unless I know that it's going to be something that's going to be, you know, aggressive, and that something's going to happen about it. There's also organizations that take advantage of grieving families,
Yes,
and parade them around at their events, and then put out, you know, their fundraising letters. Oh my gosh, this is what we've done. And they claim that they're a part of the Florida anti-illegal bill that Angel Mom Kreiger Michael passed. You know, she's been able to accomplish what nobody in this country has been able to do. As a freshman representative in Florida, you know, some organizations try and claim like they were a part of all that when she never even had a conversation with them. This was hard work with her guts and determination there to make a difference. So, you know, another warning as we part, because we're running out of time, but make sure you know who you're donating to, because a lot of these organizations, you know, that claim that they're out there to help these people are not. Lost Voices of Fentanyl need your donations. These people travel. Virginia coordinates trips to DC and has big rallies and gets in front of these political figures and lets them know we're mad and we're not going to put up with non-action anymore. But, you know, the same with Angel families. We're not as active right now because, you know, once the Biden administration came in, you know, we were just kind of shut down, and their backs were turned on us for sure. They didn't want to hear from us, but we've had to try and find other ways. But definitely tell them how to get a hold of you, Virginia, your website. Tell them your information.
You can find our website at the letters LV as in Victor, OF, the initials for Lost Voices of Fentanyl.org. Or you can find us on Facebook in our Lost Voices of Fentanyl family discussion group. This is a hub for more than 31.7 thousand families who've lost loved ones to fentanyl poisonings. We support each other. We organize our annual march and rally in DC, which this year will be taking place on July 13th. We are marching to the White House again. Last year we did it in a tropical storm. Our families we're going to keep going. We're not stopping. So please, if you've lost a loved one or you just want to support us, join our group. Follow us on Facebook and, you know, visit our website. Also, we have an online store where we have banners that you can display showing people who these victims really are.
Right.
so that we can start bringing this mainstream to let them see that these are our kids. These aren't throwaway people. They matter.
Correct. I love you so much, Virginia. And
I love
thank
you too,
for your
Mary
fight
Ann.
in this. And, we'll be in touch here very, very soon. But it's been a pleasure having you on today. I love you.
I just want to say one last thing to everybody who doesn't know. It was Mary Ann Mendoza who found me as an angel mom, not knowing what to do, who encouraged me to build something. And she has a lot to do with why we have what we have today. So I just want to thank you for that, Mary Ann. You're amazing.
I saw it in you. You have it in your heart, and you're the best. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. I love Virginia. I've gone a little bit over here, but I do want to just say tomorrow I'm going to have a young conservative woman on my show to talk about how the younger generation views what's going on politically in our country. So I hope you join us. And next week we've got a big lineup. Kathleen Wynne, who's running for Congress in Arizona. We've got Sheriff Mark Lamb. The 23rd, we've got Andy Biggs. The 30th, we've got Tom Homan. So we've got some big names coming on the podcast, and I hope you tune in. Thank you.